Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, our producer Justin Stein is with us, and today our special guest is Greg Bedard of BostonSportsJournal.com. You all know him as a Patriots writer forever and ever, covering the team, I think, in an unparalleled fashion. No offense, Aaron, you're also unparalleled in the way that you do things. We will remind you, BostonSportsJournal.com, a great Father's Day gift. If you're looking for something with last minute, I couldn't recommend it more. And Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited. I've been, with Sports Info Solutions and Football Outsiders, I've been a fan, I don't know, forever. I mean, I think I was one of the first media guys to sort of, look at what Aaron and the crew was doing very early on and apply it. And it's always been one of my essential tools. So I'm excited to be here. And
I know we were talking just recently on the show about how there's been so much national media writers that so many of them come out of covering the Patriots and come out of that market that you're in. And your name came up as one of the guys that's been really successful on that end. So I know Aaron has only the fondest things to say about you as well. But hopefully we can get some disagreement today. So Aaron, I'm going to cede the floor. We're talking Patriots today. So I think you pulled out some topics that you thought would be interesting to discuss around the roundtable. So what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the Patriots, the number one subject has to be the quarterback, and the quarterback is Jarrett Stidham. I mean, all offseason long, some of us have been like, wouldn't it be nice if the Patriots signed this guy, signed that guy? Usually this guy and that guy were the same guy, Cam Newton. That's clearly not going to happen. They believe in Jarrett Stidham. So the question is, why should we believe that Jarrett Stidham is more than just a fourth-round pick with no regular season experience? Because normally you would see a guy come in who's a third-day pick with no regular season experience. Your expectations are going to be really low. And certainly for us building, a statistical projection system, the expectations of the system are really low. So why should they not be that low?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, the short answer is I think they should be low. And I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that wisdom because I'm certainly in that camp. I think a couple of things I think we need to discuss about Stidham. And also, look, I still think there's a decent chance that Brian Hoyer, depending on how much training camp we have, how much work they can get through, how comfortable they feel with Stidham, I still think there's a chance that Brian Hoyer starts opening day for the Patriots just because of how steeped he is in this scheme. Somebody from the Patriots made a remark to me in a recent conversation talking about like how many games Brian Hoyer has been in the system, and he's never started for the Patriots. And so he has vast experience. I've been in the quarterback room with him in Houston. I've seen him operate. I've seen the depth of his knowledge of the system. And if the Patriots think they need that in the early going, I think that they'll do that, and they won't be afraid to make that decision. But really, for this team to have a chance, it's got to be Stidham. Now, how we got here, I think there's sort of a misconception on how they landed on Jarrett Stidham, and as far as being the starter this year and not adding anybody else. I mean, there are a lot of people, mostly sort of pro-Patriot writers, who are like, well, this shows that their confidence in what they saw in him last year. And I can tell you from talking to people within the organization, they have no clue what he's going to do. There is no feeling that he is going to be a franchise quarterback or not. We got here because of circumstances, really. Number one, Tom Brady was plan A in this offseason. They thought at the end of the day, Brady would not have much of a market. And instead of signing with a Tampa Bay or Los Angeles Chargers, he would elect to come back here for about $14, $15 million. They didn't think that he would leave out of spite. He ended up leaving out of spite. So instead of using that cap space, Belichick gambled and said, you know what? I think we can get more out of that money if we tag Joe Thuney and possibly trade him for a first-round pick, second-round pick, what have you. That hasn't worked out. And then the other thing is the pandemic has totally changed the equation on everything. Because I think if the Patriots knew they were going to have a true offseason with mini camps and veteran mini camps and OTAs and all this stuff and a full training camp and a full preseason, and they had cap space, then I think you would have seen them try to get a veteran quarterback who would be comfortable coming in and competing, and then go from there. Like I know that the Patriots inquired about Kyle Allen, and then they liked him, and that would have been sort of a little bit more experienced in him, but it would have been a competitive situation. So I think this is where they are. I could tell you from talking to people within the organization, they have no expectations. I mean, I talked to people after the season to get a gauge on Stidham because we all knew Tom Brady was the $15 million question in the offseason. And the answer that I got, he had a good rookie season. We liked what he did. We like where he is. This is a little early for him. He's about the same place as Jimmy Garoppolo after year one. But as far as him being a franchise quarterback, we have no idea. We're not going to know until he gets on the field and does it one way or the other.
It's tough because I know that a lot of the thoughts, there's some people out there who feel that he dropped in the draft and the way he looked in college was sort of hurt by the Auburn offense and what was around him there. But I know, for example, I went back to the SIS rookie handbook and looked at what you guys said last year about him. And it was basically he had good short accuracy, but problematic. And Derek Klassen did some charting of the top rookie quarterbacks last year, also of their college performance. And he had Stidham last in adjusted accuracy based on distance. It feels like if Stidham has trouble with deep accuracy, then the offense is going to have like the same problems that it did last year, only without the experience of Brady to know where to throw the ball and how to adjust the play at the line. That Stidham doesn't have that experience.
I completely agree with you, and I think this is a situation where, I mean, I think the Patriots are okay being where they are right now just because of circumstances, and nobody knows what's. But also that they have a ton of cap space next year. Should the cap stay somewhat consistent over the next few years? That
itself is a question.
Right. Yes, exactly. And if Stidham hits, great. Then they can use all that cap space to fill in around him. And he looks like he's competitive, and he looks like he's staying on that trajectory to be a franchise quarterback. If not, then they can use some of that cap space to go get another quarterback somehow. But I think really, ideally, they look at it and they say, okay, well, we're pretty much back in the same situation that we were in 2001. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Stidham who barely beat out a veteran, if he even did. It just might have been economics and Hoyer. Brady in 2001 barely beat out Damon Heward. I've talked to Charlie Weiss, and he said it was basically a flip of a coin. Nobody had any idea of what Brady was going to be, and they basically schemed around the quarterback for about the first 3 years of Brady. That's sort of what they're going to do. Now, the question remains, is the NFL comparable 20 years out that you could do the same sort of thing? And I'm sure a lot of people would argue you can't win that way anymore in this league. And that's really sort of the $1 million question with this team. But I think that's where you start. They're going to use exactly what they have. They're going to need a lot of things to happen on offense for them to be better, but they're just looking to be more efficient. They need a better running game. They need the quarterback position to be more efficient. They need guys to stay healthy at wide receiver and tight end and things like that. And if all those things work, then, yeah, you have a team that can be competitive, certainly in the AFC East, and maybe, win a playoff game or two.
So that's amazing what you said there about Charlie Weiss saying that it was a flip of a coin. And I think you're spot on. It's amazing how we look back on Brady's career and we seem to forget really what the story was for those first few Super Bowls. Not you guys, but a lot of people certainly do. The other thing, just to react to, you said they wanted to offer him just 14 or 15 million this year. That would have been less than he's made even at his kind of reduced salary over the past few years, right?
Nah, it's about the same ballpark. I mean, basically the Brady being a great value sort of kicked in the past couple years once he got to this last deal that he had. Before that, Brady was pretty much, when you put in all the signing bonuses and things like that, cash on hand, he pretty much was around the top. So he wasn't as much of a bargain as people think he was until the past few seasons. And really, I don't think that the Patriots were all that thrilled with, they thought he was good the past couple of years. I know he was graded sort of the same, but I don't think they were all that enamored with some of his attitude the past couple of years. And I think, with Belichick, they say, look, you're 43 and, you're not going to make $30 million. So I think they could have, if Brady had an interest, I think sort of that was put out there to Brady to see if he was on the same page with them. And then it turned out he really wasn't, that he was ready to leave out of spite because he sort of saw, well, you didn't add anybody offensively. Like, how's it going to be any different than it has been the past couple of years where you've stuck me with nothing and put all the money in all the defense and I get nothing to work with on offense. And so Brady was just like, I'm out of here. So I think they could have maybe went up to say $20 million a year, but I think that's about where they were going to go.
By the way, I just want to object to the idea that, and if Brady feels this way, and this idea that the Patriots did anything to get him weapons over the last couple. I'm not objecting to you, Greg. I'm objecting to Tom thinking this. They gave them Antonio Brown, but Brown turned out to be crazy. They used a first-round pick on a wide receiver, but that guy got injured. They used a second-round pick the next year to trade for a wide receiver, but that guy got injured. So it's not like they didn't go out and try to find receivers. What they didn't do last year was convince Rob Gronkowski to come back. But as far as wide receivers go, I feel like they did a lot to try to get him wide receivers. It just all went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'll disagree with you slightly on that just because, I mean, at the end of the day, when you sort of look at it, you say, okay, just in the abstract, yeah, okay, they did. But if I'm a quarterback, if I'm Tom Brady and I'm watching and I'm lining up, say, especially last year in last year's training camp and the joint practices, it was just glaring. Tom Brady's practicing against this defense every week. And they have guys like a Landon Roberts who can't even get on the field. And the Patriots can't even have a decent backup center that is so they can run the same rushing offense. They don't produce anything at tight end. My big thing is, fine, you added Antonio Brown like right before the season opener, but like, why can't you do things better than Demaryius Thomas or Marquise Lee or any of these other guys who are reclamation projects? Why can't you do any better for Brady, give him some depth going into a season so that they can actually practice and get ready instead of just, oh, well, we'll see if Tom can make chicken salad out of chicken shit, and if not, we're just going to throw somebody at him in week 1 or week 2. Like, I just don't think that's a way to play good offensive football. I know Tom was frustrated by it, and I don't disagree with that. Some of his other gripes, yes, I do disagree about, but not that one. I mean, a first-round wide receiver, but first-round wide receivers, rookie wide receivers never work here anyways. So in Tom's mind, he's like, don't give me these guys, but they were where they were.
As much as I want you guys at each other's throats, I don't think you're necessarily disagreeing too much. It can be both true that they tried and that they failed to get weapons for Tom Brady, which I think might be fair.
And they weren't in a very good position to try. Like, if Tom was looking into the future, if for 2020, there was no room to try to get an Antonio Brown. He doesn't know how Mohamed Sanu is going to come back from his injury. He's had a year with N'Keal Harry, and maybe he doesn't trust the guy. So I definitely could see where Tom for 2020 is like, yeah, this is just not happening yet.
I mean, this year was a perfect example and totally validated some of Brady's feelings that you have the greatest and deepest wide receiver draft ever, and Belichick doesn't draft anybody. Doesn't even take a flyer and somebody in like the 6th round that could hit big. I mean, if Brady was still here, he would have been throwing things watching that draft. Like, of course, you're going to.
Instead, he was probably really happy, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to draft another strong safety who's like Patrick Chung, yet you still have Patrick Chung, but you're not going to give me another goddamn wide receiver. I mean, I could see Brady's reaction being that if he was still here.
And coming back, I want to circle back to Stidham because I think it's interesting to look at the player versus kind of the system. If you look at going back to what Aaron was saying, he was not great in 2018 amongst just SEC quarterbacks. He was 5th in IQR. His completion percentage was just 61%, closer to Felipe Franks than he was to Tua and Jake Fromm. So it wasn't great, and not a lot in the area of air yards either. It wasn't like he was getting the ball down the field, to what Aaron was saying before. All of that said, the on-target percentage was a little bit better when compared to the completion percentage. The team might have had something to do with that. The system certainly wasn't great for showing off his skill set. What I wonder about is, what's the argument for him? The argument for him, I think, is Belichick and McDaniels, right? It's this system. It's that they found ways to make pieces work together, and maybe that's the argument for Stidham. You know, I remember I've joked with Aaron, like, are the Patriots tanking? Like, it kind of feels like they're tanking. Are the Patriots tanking? And the answer's always been like, no, of course not. It's not. They don't have that gene in their bodies that would go towards tanking. That said, I do kind of think the argument for Stidham over Hoyer is, let's take a shot. Let's see if we can do something good this year. And if it crashes and burns, of any year to crash and burn, this is a great year to crash and burn and maybe get a better draft slot and actually have a way to build towards the future.
If they were tanking, they wouldn't have, for example, re-signed Devin McCourty.
Right. Or Jason. I mean, Devin, okay. But Jason, I mean, when you have J.C. Jackson and Jonathan Jones and you took Juwan Williams last year, like, I just don't get it. But to your point about Stidham, and I think it's completely valid, is that one of the things, you know, people like to talk up Jarrett Stidham and, he was going to be this and that 2 years ago with it, you know, after his junior season or sophomore season at Auburn. But then guys left in the draft. He wasn't left with much around him. Well, sorry, but with a franchise quarterback, I want somebody who's going to elevate the rest of the guys, not be a product of anybody can be a product of what's around them. But it's the guys who are real franchise quarterbacks are the guys who lift up, who are able to be successful without depending really on how much is around them. And I just don't see that with Stidham. Plus, he was in Baylor and then he went to Auburn, which are two of the simplest passed offenses in any scheme at any level. And now he's going to be trying to run the Patriots scheme. There's a lot of questions. I do think he's really smart. I think he's better than Auburn and Baylor, but those are some of the issues.
So do you think they try to run more this year? I know I'm going to break into a stat here, but like historically, it was always the Patriots had an efficient running game because teams were so scared of Brady, they couldn't put lots of people in the box. Then the last couple of years, the Patriots actually run a lot against heavy boxes. Like last year, they were sixth in how often they ran against 8 or more in the box. The year before, they were first in how often. So, like, they are not listening to the analytics people when analytics people say to only run against lighter boxes. And are they going to do that again? Are they going to, like, line it up, and it doesn't matter how the defense is, they're going to try to run more, kind of like the second half of 2018? Is that the direction we're going? And how much does Andrews coming back at center from the heart problem that he had last year?
I do think that they're going to run the ball more. And I think the stat you bring up is interesting, and I don't know how much you guys break it down. You know, in theory, I don't know how you measure a heavy box, maybe just in terms of like personnel.
Here I'm doing just the number of people in the box. Yeah.
Okay. But I think the Patriots look at it more on a micro level where it's like, say, and I'm trying to think of an example, but in 2018, when they played the Chargers definitely were a light box because they didn't have that many linebackers, but maybe the Chiefs and then maybe the Rams, there might be, say, 4 linemen and 3 linebackers in the box. But if that linebacker, if 2 of them are really light, I think that's the way the Patriots look at it. I mean, if they're like 220-pound linebackers, they don't really care. I mean, if they know they have the size advantage, and this comes through scouting going into the game, hey, we want them in this personnel because we have the advantage, then they're going to run into that. And they did that in 2018. And I think this year what's interesting with the team, and you guys would probably be able to talk about how this affects the 49ers and also the Packers, and it's something Aaron and I have talked about a little bit privately, is that the Patriots now have gone from James Devlin, who was your traditional sort of, you know, very heavy fullback, didn't give you much in the passing game, wasn't the greatest athlete, basically just was a bulldozer, to now they go with Dan Vitale from the Packers and also Dalton Keene, who they drafted out of Virginia Tech, the sense that I get, and it sort of goes to the 49ers and USEP, now the game, we've seen the game become a game of basically like 11 personnel against nickel secondaries. Some of these teams, including the 49ers and I think the Packers because of LaFleur's connection to Shanahan and other teams, for these teams it's becoming it's a base game. They want to get the defense and base as much as possible and work against that mostly through the passing game by using those fullbacks, H-backs as an advantage against the tight end. So I think you're going to see the Patriots in base a lot, and depending on what kind of matchups and how people are going to defend them, that's going to determine whether they.
I think you make a really great point, and John Shirley, one of our researchers, has been doing a lot into like the performance of players on and off the field, with and without various players. And looking at Devlin last year, you do notice some interesting things. They were much more likely to run a zone scheme than a gap scheme with him on the field. And then in terms of the performance in the run game was much worse with Devlin on the field, which I think might be part of the reason why they're going away from that. 48% positive play rate on rushing plays with him off, just 28% with him on the field. Negative 0.23.
Is that just last year? Or
just last year. Last year. So not a ton of sample size. 52 snaps, and they weren't good. So it gives you an idea maybe of why they are moving away in that direction like you were talking about. And I think you're right, Greg. I think that the future of the NFL is more figuring out – it's easy to say, oh, they were good in 12 personnel. They were good in 11 personnel. But what's the defense doing? You know, is the defense like San Diego a couple years ago, putting 7 defensive backs out there because there's not a running threat? Or are we talking about the Ravens right now who are trying to run the ball more than anybody else, but not in the way that we typically think about running at all? What they're trying to do is really space you out in order to make all those running lanes work. So I think that that's a really good point, and I do think that you're probably right that moving in that direction of the more athletic kind of fullback, H-back type player back there, I think that fits in with the modern NFL a little bit better.
One of the ironic things is that overall, league-wide, not talking about the Patriots in particular, but league-wide, passing works better from 21 personnel. Rushing works better from 11 personnel. It always works better to do what the defense doesn't think you're going to do.
I think that's a great point. And one of the other reasons that an NFL offensive coordinator told me on why teams want to go, like we were talking about Shanahan's offense and sort of where people might, because people copycat stuff all the time. And they said the really smart reason why you want the opponent in base as much as possible is especially if you have a less experienced quarterback, is because there are less pressure packages out of base personnel as opposed to sub packages where you're used to, okay, well, we need to bring the corner off the slot or we need to do this. Whereas in base, there aren't as many blitz calls, and so maybe you're not as getting many different. Yeah.
And just going back, just to close out the Devlin point, looking at 2018, and obviously much more snaps, not much of a difference between the Patriots' rushing performance with and without Devlin, but him being on the field was a tip-off. They rushed more often than they passed with him on the field. With him off the field, they passed 364 more times than they ran.
So let's talk about the defense then, because I think for every Patriots fan, they're expecting I think the feeling for Patriots fan going into the season is, okay, the offense isn't going to be good. We're going to be saved by our defense, which was so good last year. And this is where I give a little bit of a preview of what's coming with the Football Outsiders team projections, where we're going to be probably lower on the Patriots than anybody else. And the big reason why is the expected defensive regression. And the big reason for the expected defensive regression, other than defenses just generally regress, and the Patriots were an average defense before last year where they were the best defense in the league. One is they depended a lot on turnovers. But the second is we have this stat that is approximate value over replacement of the players lost. And the Patriots will have the most player talent lost on defense of any defense of the last 16 or 17 years that we've built our projection system on. Now, that's not like a guarantee because one of the other really high teams was last year's Ravens and their defense was fine. But this team has lost a ton of veteran guys this year. So how do you feel like that comes? I mean, obviously, mostly they've lost front seven guys, right? Other than Deron Harmon, the safety who went to Detroit.
Yeah.
But like, are there one-to-one replacements in the scheme? Does Josh, I don't exactly know how to pronounce his name, Uche?
Yep.
Does he basically replace Kyle Van Noy? Does Jawan Bentley basically replace Jamie Collins? Or are they going to start doing things differently on like, how do they make up for the fact that they lost Van Noy, Collins, Danny Shelton, Landon Roberts, a lot of guys?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you that they, as far as Shelton, they think that Bo Allen is a one-for-one replacement. And actually, it didn't time out this way publicly in terms of media reports, but the Patriots offered Bo Allen before Danny Shelton ever signed with the Lions. So the Patriots wanted Bo Allen. They see him as a slight upgrade, maybe brings a little bit more pass rush, is just as good against the run. And really, it took Shelton until like second half of last year to be decent against the run. So the Patriots wanted Bo Allen over Shelton, period. I think the big thing, Jamie Collins is great, mostly for half a season. I've never been the biggest Jamie Collins fan. I think that the Kyle Duggar is one of the guys, the safety, could fill some of Jamie Collins' positions, especially in coverage and things like that. The big thing is going to be, how do they replace Kyle Van Noy? Because I think what he did on the edge, what he did pass rushing wise, that's going to be really tough. And they certainly have guys like John Simon and Shalik Calhoun. There's going to be a big competition, but I think they think they're going to be fine defensively for the most part. I mean, I think where they take comfort is that most of their pressure came both from coverage, and also they really schemed up their pressure. They didn't really have a whole lot of dominating one-on-one pass rushers. So that's going to continue. They're going to have to continue to scheme things up, which sort of trends towards more veteran players. So I give those guys the edge to play a little bit more. Winovich is certainly going to have to do a lot more. He's going to be going from a part-timer. I think he's really the one-for-one change with Van Noy. And I think just in general, they take a lot of comfort in their secondary. They think that they have the best secondary in the league, and that's gonna buy them a lot of things.
I agree that that's where the projection may be a little off about the loss of talent, because what we have never tested is what happens if you measure loss of talent for front seven and secondary differently. And if you are one of the people who believes that the secondary is more important than the front seven in general, the losses here are pretty much all front seven.
Yeah.
It's really hard to imagine the cornerbacks, other than Gilmore, who's always been that good. God, it's hard to imagine J.C. Jackson and Jonathan Jones being that good again. They were so good last year.
I mean, I think it's valid. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why they brought Jason McCourty back, sort of to give them another option. But, I was impressed towards the end of last season when I got a few glimpses at Jawan Bentley. I mean, it's not Jawan Bentley. Jawan Williams, the cornerback.
Yeah, second-round pick last year, barely played.
Yeah, really, really tall guy. I mean, I think the world of J.C. Jackson, and I love Jonathan Jones, but, those guys, are they going to be – is that whole group going to be able to stay healthy? That's more where I have my questions. But I think that in the front seven, I think if Lawrence Guy can be another marathon man, which I think really one of their big flaws on defense is that they're relying too much on guys like Guy and Shelton to play a lot of consistent snaps and never get hurt because they don't have anything behind them. But I do think they have guys who fit into their scheme and will execute, considering really it's about execution and about scheming up pressure as opposed to just having, say, like, a Clowney or somebody like a dominating physical presence on the outside who can just overpower people. That's never been their game. That's not who they look for. And I think they feel okay with the pieces in general.
I'm still one of these guys that values pass rush over the secondary play, but I think when you look at it, you can either, from a football perspective, prioritize pass rush, prioritize secondary play, or you can take more of a balanced approach. And I think that what the Patriots are doing is probably wiser than a balanced approach, in the sense of they feel like they can get by with like their 5 guys in the secondary that they're going to count on, and then just scheme up everything up front. And, we're going to try to scheme pressure. We're going to try to handle that. But give me that talent back there. And in kind of the survival analysis mode that people have been thinking in terms of, I think it makes sense to think about building that way.
Yeah, the negative here is just the idea that it was mostly the same players in 2018, and until the Super Bowl, they were basically an average defense all year. Yeah. Then they were phenomenal with the Super Bowl against the Rams.
Can I ask you guys about a name, Deionte Wise? Not a guy I'm super familiar with, but when I pull up the data hub, I see that on 94 pass rush snaps last year, he had 19 pressures, as good as anybody not named Jamie Collins on the team. Any chance that he could step up into a bigger role this year?
See, now Wise is an interesting guy. He's a guy that I was high on from the beginning when he came in as a 4th-round pick. I thought he popped really early, and I thought he had a chance to have a really good career, or at least outproduce his draft slot. And that sort of held true the first couple of years, but that's when the Patriots were primarily a 4-3 defense, and he could play defensive end. And then the past about year and a half, they went to being more of a 3-4, and they asked them, especially in that game, against the Chiefs and against the Ravens, they asked him to basically play 3-4 end. Somebody explained it to me as they viewed him as Bobby Hamilton, that 270-pound guy who could two-gap and could do a lot of things. The problem is that Wise has a very unique body where he's got really long legs, he's got long arms, and he can't hold up on the interior. He is just an exterior pass rusher, sort of hold the edge. He can do that, but if you kick him inside, where he's with guards and tackles, he just gets killed. And so it all depends on where they line him up. I mean, if he's a sub-outside pass rusher, yes, I agree that he could bring consistent pass rush and help them. But if they have other guys, like say they want to get Uche on the field, he's going to be outside, and they're going to ask Wise to rush from the 3 technique, and he just can't do that. He just can't. He hasn't been able to do it.
All right, we're running out of time. Before we get out of here, Aaron, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Just as long as I'm throwing in stats, I will point out one of the things that the Patriots defense will do really well is tackle. They prize it. They've been one of the best tackling defenses every year. They were last in the league last year with only 86 broken tackles. So that's one thing I do have faith, is that even with the new kids that they drafted, that they probably looked at tackling, because that is just a big thing for them.
Yeah, I agree. And one name we didn't mention, who I'm excited about on defense, who I think is going to be an upgrade, is Adrian Phillips from the Chargers. I think he's tremendous. I love Duron Harmon as a guy. I didn't think he was much of a player. He's basically just a deep safety. Now you mix in Adrian Phillips with Devin McCourty and Patrick Chung and Kyle Duggar. Now all of a sudden you guys have different guys who can do different things, and you become a little bit more unpredictable in the secondary. And I think he's going to be tremendous for them. He tackles awesome. He did a lot of playing the robber role for the Chargers. Him and Devin McCourty can sort of exchange doing that, which makes them a little bit unpredictable. But I think he is a definite upgrade for that secondary. And I think fans who don't know him, they're going to be very impressed once they see him on the field.
And definitely he helps give – the fact is, if they do have injuries on defense, they do have a lot of depth. I mean, there's 5 good cornerbacks. There's 4 good safeties. There is a lot of depth in that secondary.
Ask Brady about whether that's true on offense.
On defense, there's depth.
Well, Greg, you know a guy that I'm sure you're very familiar with, my old boss, Mike Lombardi. He would constantly talk about building a basketball team at wide receiver, and then conversely, how you have to be able to defend the basketball team in your secondary. And it sounds like he's one of those guys that really helps fit them there, guard multiple positions, kind of, so to speak. Great point. All right. Thank you, Greg. And thank you to all of our listeners. Be sure to check out the SIS film breakdowns on YouTube, led by our top 2 scouts on the Football Rookie Handbook, Nathan Cooper and John Todd. Sports Info Solutions is recruiting 2020 football video scouts. If you're interested in applying, head to the careers section of our website, sportsinfosolutions.com. And the Football Outsiders Almanac will be out in July. Aaron, do we have a status update?
Yeah, man, we've got some chapters done already, so we're shooting for July 15th.
And thanks again to our guest, Greg Bedard of BostonSportsJournal.com. Again, I want to encourage everybody to go out and get it. It's a great Father's Day gift, especially if your dad's a Patriots fan. You're not going to get better coverage, I think, as you've heard today.
Celtics, Sox, Bruins, and Revs. They do them all.
For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our producer, Justin Stein, and our guest, Greg Bedard, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.